Administration and the local government. On behalf of the Local Government Management Education Committee for NASPA, I extend and share greetings. If you're familiar with local government, you probably know there are over 90,000 units of local government in the United States. That includes cities, townships, school districts, special districts, and a variety of other structures, including townships in the Midwest and New England. Because MPA and MPP graduate students often go into work in local government, it's so important that our programs have some familiarity with the skills and competencies and professionalization that our local government management students need. So thank you to Stacy and her committee for organizing this panel to bring together some great voices on how we can better integrate local government management education in the MPA and MPP in the public affairs classroom. And we hope the conversation gives you some new, fresh ideas about how to bring great content to your students. And I'll turn things back over to Stacy to start questions.
And that's, as we like to say, we're both like the Dr. Z's in the field. So, I keep joking with Eric that we need to get matching shirts one day. It's going to happen. So, and I'm here on behalf of NASPA's marketing, the MPA MPP committee. And yeah, as Eric was saying, we just kind of joined forces to bring this together and then reached out to our three panelists today who were more than generous with their time. So really, they're going to share with us their expertise teaching about working in local governments. So I'm just going to start with brief introductions, just the order I see on my screen. So that'll be Kathy, excuse me, I can't read, Cassie, Marga, and Norton. So if you could just please tell us a little bit about yourselves, including your journey into local governments, how you got there, how you wanted to go into public service broadly, and kind of what you do. That would be great. Cassie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Cassie Johnson. I work for the City of Scottsdale as Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives. I'm traditionally with the police department, but I am on special assignment at Westworld of Scottsdale, which is an event venue. So a very different take on local government than what my traditional path has been, doing special assignments like strategic planning and process improvement. I have my MPA from Arizona State University, and I actually started with Scottsdale as an intern in undergrad. And I had this opportunity. I was pursuing a career in psychology and wanted to look at working with those in law enforcement. And my academic advisor was like, well, this isn't exactly that, but you can at least see if you like cops, and want to work with them for the rest of your life. And so I took an opportunity for an internship with the police department, and I immediately loved being in local government. I loved that ability to see that my work had an impact at the most local level. And so that kind of changed my entire trajectory, and I pursued my master's in public administration. There, I met Dr. Bentley as a student and a TA, and I was a fellow for Arizona State moving to Los Angeles with their California fellowship program. And when I was looking at graduation, an opportunity came back up at Scottsdale as a senior analyst in the police department. And it was all of these things that just aligned, and I ended up coming back home. And so I have had a lot of opportunities in other local governments as an intern and fellow, but I've really loved that ability to be in the weeds. And then I had an opportunity. I love school and I love learning. And so I asked about coming back to teach. And so I went back to ASU again as a faculty associate, working under Dr. Bentley there and being able to create my own curriculum. Went back and got a different master's through the Homeland Security and Center for Defense. And so I stopped my teaching career so I could be a student again. But an opportunity came back up, and I'll let Marga share more about that. And so I'm still sort of have one toe in the classroom a little bit when I can, but my career has had a whole journey that I'm really fortunate and grateful for.
My turn? Okay. So my name is Dr. Marga Bentley. I am a clinical associate professor at the Arizona State University. I'm also one of my school's associate directors, so I do a fair amount of teaching, but I'm also responsible for things like the course schedule and budget and part-time faculty hiring and faculty teaching assignments and all of the things. And so I actually don't work in local government, but because of my work within the program, I've had a lot of opportunities to engage with students who are interested in working in local government, as well as local government professionals, and also truth in advertising. My husband worked in local government for 30 years. So I had a lot of opportunities to have in-depth discussions about how the materials that we teach do or don't relate to the realities of local government. And I've taught students all throughout our programs. We have a robust undergraduate program as well as our master's in public administration and public policy. And so I've taught students that are 18 years old just coming into learning about the world, as well as those who've already made the decision that they want to pursue a career in public administration. And I've spent a lot of time recently working in that undergraduate space. And it's been really heartening to watch a number of our students go on and pursue those graduate degrees. And so some of the things that have really stuck out to me is that one, 18 and 19-year-olds are so much fun because you can still amaze them, you can still shock them. But one of my favorite things in the world to do is take something that's really complex and break it down and help people how learn how to understand it. And in particular, I find that a lot of those students in that age range, they see things that are wrong with the world, they want to fix it, and they don't know how. And so, one of the things that I've really focused on in my classes is how to provide examples that interest them. Because it turns out, like, really complicated and examples that are interesting to me about like healthcare are not necessarily front of mind for students. Soda taxes. That's more interesting, things like that relate to their day-to-day life. COVID was a great one that we've talked about in a lot of forms. But most recently, we were trying to find a way to really make a strong connection with some of our students. And so I am most famous for my class, Taylor Swift Public Policy version, where I used Taylor Swift as a case study to explain all the things about government. The class is basically an intro to government class, but the case study for it is Taylor Swift. So
I've never heard the Taylor Swift story, so I'm looking forward to learning more about that. My name's Norton Bonaparte, and I was invited to be on the panel. I currently serve as the city manager for the city of Sanford, Florida. I have been a city manager since 1988, and I've served in 6 cities. In 1987, I became an adjunct professor at National Louis University and have been teaching almost since then, currently with the University of Central Florida as a visiting, well, as a guest speaker. But I've been a city manager in a city in Maryland, three in Virginia, uh, in Kansas, and now in Florida for the last 14 years. So I'm very interested in local government. Local government is where things happen. I just came from a presentation of the Seminole Chamber of Commerce where they had our state legislators speak about what they accomplished at the state legislature this year, and it was virtually nothing. Their one charge is to pass a budget, and they have not passed the budget. They've adjourned, and then they're going to have a special session in April. So I appreciate local government because that's where things get done and it's closest to the people. It's a very visceral feeling when you see whether it's a park or a playground or the police responding to an emergency. Local government is the government closest to the people, and that's where I think is the most exciting. So.
Thanks to our panelists for those introductions, and I hope we can go through our group again, maybe in reverse order this time. Norton, continuing on with you first. Can each of you spend just a few moments reflecting on some of the most significant challenges facing local governments today as we think about this educational space with students? What are some of the key challenges that need to be on our radar as educators?
I think dealing with resources. the cost, whether it's the tariffs or other expenditures that are increasing. In Florida, they're talking about reducing or eliminating property tax, which is a major source of funding for local governments. So I think the students need to be able to know about finance, certainly. But in addition to that, it's the interpersonal skills. It's being able to communicate with the public. It's being able to work with elected officials, work with businesses, owners, and work with the staff. The city manager, for instance, serves as the linchpin for the city. And I think your students need to be having the skills that are financial, but more importantly, I think, is to be able to work with people, communicate with people, and to help people get along. That's the very brief thumbnail sketch.
Sorry, I'm taking notes. I'm learning things too. No, um, no, yeah, I have to say that as an educator, my thoughts about local government are a little bit more entrenched in what I encounter in the classroom. So I'm just going to say that from my perspective, what I see as the biggest challenge of local government is that students are never taught about it. Period. They come into the classroom, they don't know the difference. I mean, the number one thing people like to do is complain about government, which is my pet peeve because I'm like, which government, where? And so one of the things that I really spend a lot of time doing in my classes is talking about federalism and talking about the fact that, if people are frustrated because government works slowly, well, it was designed to do that. If you don't know who does what, it's confusing because we do have all of these different levels of government that are doing things. And so part of what I do is just try to educate them on here's what the federal government does, here's what states do, but really the bulk of your day-to-day life is through local government. One of the things that I ask everybody, whether they're a student, a prospective student, a prospective student's family, my stepdaughter's boyfriend. I always ask everybody, have you encountered government today? How have you interacted with government today? And it just blows people's minds when I'm like, how'd you get to this room? Did you drive a car? On what street? Was it a city street? Was it a state highway? Was it an interstate? Um, did you turn on the light switch? Because that electricity got to you by way of government. Did you turn on the water? I really hope you like flushed the toilet today because that's again an example of local government and the things that it provides for you. Did you eat food? Did you buy something? You know, all of the different things. Because often when people think of interacting with government, they think about getting arrested, and that's not actually the primary way that people interact with government. So that's what I really try to focus on is I want people to be more involved and engaged. And in order to do that, they have to really have a better sense of how the world is set up.
I love all of that. And so as a person that has been able to be in the classroom and teach, but also I'm a person that still hires at an entry level in local government. And I have all the way from one of our entry level positions with my record specialists all the way up to senior management in our organization. And so I think the biggest thing that I can see is the absolutely, as Norton was sharing with the resources and the limited resources or funding sources being restricted, but competing priorities at every level and every aspect of, right? So if you're competing with those limited financial resources, how do you navigate what is the most important thing today, which can change on a dime? And so it's really that critical thinking of being able to look at the big picture but also being able to balance that fine detail that you need to have and pivot between both of those things, right? And so, because you're going to have to look at all of these major situations and life impacts, right? To Dr. Bentley's point about every single thing you do. I used to tell my students when we would talk about local government and they're like they would say something like, okay, that's at the federal level, which is important, right? But do you know who your council members are in the city that you live in? The parking meters in Phoenix, where the downtown campus is, changed from free at 6 o'clock. Classes started at 6 o'clock. It went to 8 o'clock. They were not happy in my classroom about that. And I'm like, how many of you guys are Phoenix residents? And the Phoenix Council just made a decision that that has tangible impact on your life today. And so it is absolutely important to know what's happening around you, but also take the energy and time to learn about what's happening in the city in which you live, because those are going to be the things that you're going to see the fastest impact your day-to-day life. And so teaching that, but then also helping now my employees as they come in and balance all those things. And it has to grow at each step of the organization.
So I think, Cassie, I want to pick up on that, and then maybe we'll go kind of this time, Cassie, Cassie Norton, Dr. Bentley. That's okay. So you all said it in a couple ways and are touching on it, but how can, we as, faculty and instructors, and maybe if there's students here who are considering like, hey, I want to get, into this, like, how can we like prepare our students to do some of these things that you're saying? Like, how can we take, I wrote down, working with people, dealing with resources, tariffs, the energy to learn about, those resources in your city, helping, where you live, flushing a toilet and what that happens. How do we transform our classrooms and give those students those skills that you all are talking about? So what can we do? I guess is the short question.
I think there's a lot, right? And it is helpful because I don't ask this in the obviously in the interview process, right? But I do talk to my staff once they come in and like the how did you hear about us and like what and a lot of the times right now, especially it's I don't know, I looked at the job boards and you were hiring, right? Now, for me, I have a million steps in the police department that you have to go through before you're going to actually get hired, right? But in other areas of our local government, it might be that simple. I have a friend that literally just was looking for a job. I've been friends with her for decades. I've been in government for all of that time, right? And she still was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, you don't listen to me. Second of all, like, but here, okay, here we go, right? And so, but now I'm watching her have all of these like light bulb moments and connections as she's getting more familiar with her role. And she's running like public meetings and she's interacting with electeds and all of these pieces, which is great. But that would have been really great if she would have figured that out 2 decades ago when we were having, right? But it just wasn't relevant. And so, how do we bring that into that classroom level? I would say, and maybe Dr. Bentley, this is a really great way. I think that there was a conversation, and I'm going to jumpstart and you can jump in. So when we were first starting the class and I was jumping in to help be a TA with the Taylor Swift class, we were having these conversations around the work that's coming. And I still think about this all the time. And Dr. Bentley said, I just want to make them better citizens, like through this class. And I was like, okay, got it. Like flipped my like, because I was sitting in a very like work grading, right? Like, okay, just very like this is part and I can adapt all of those different ways, but I was like, yes, if they just leave with 3% more knowledge about how this works, then mission accomplished, right? And the I help her with the upper division students. And so they're closer to entering the workforce than those 18, 19-year olds and seeing folks that have zero background in local government. They're not public affairs students a lot of the time. They are communications or they're business or there's some other academic program. And now they're starting to like think about and reading their thoughts on the weekly discussion threads or their papers and seeing those connection points to the local government piece. And then maybe some of them might actually go and look for a job that connects too, because you want to be a communications major? I need communicators in local government. Boom, right? Like there's a whole job market for you here. And so all of those little pieces, I think, make a difference. And so meeting kids and students and adults where they're at, no matter what part of their life they're in, I think is the best way to do that. And I think that Dr. Bentley is brilliant at it. And so I'll let her jump in from there.
I think you actually said it's Norton's turn, right, Stacey? Yeah.
Um, okay, although Dr. Bennett, I'm fine if you wanted to go and follow on what Cassie had to say.
Yeah, I can do that. I just didn't want to jump in your place. Um, so yeah, that is my current motto that I live by is I just want to make better students. And the really amazing thing about the Taylor Swift class is that it's not attracting students who are naturally majoring in things that are public administration adjacent. I'm getting the English majors, I'm getting the aviation majors, I'm getting the biological science majors. I'm getting all of these students who would never normally willingly take a class on government. And in fact, I always get a couple that are going, I thought this was a Taylor Swift class. This is a government class. And I'm like, yes, welcome. Um, and so I really feel like there's just a general lack of knowledge, and we definitely need those biological sciences background folks to come work in local government. I mean, one of the things I've heard again and again, particularly in Arizona where water is an issue, is that we need people who are willing to engage with these conversations about infrastructure. I love when the civil engineering students are in my class, right? Because this is an opportunity to show a career option that that might be a little different. And it's breaking down these prescribed ideas about what government is and what it does, and really showing, like what Norton is saying, is if you want to make something happen, the local level is where you're going to do it. If you're going to, you can email your senator all day long, but if you email your city council, you're much more likely to actually get responses. You can go talk to your city council at a public meeting. Like there's a lot more access there that is just really important. And so I really try to make sure that I include a variety of examples that are also from local government. Our final module is really all in the class is all about local government. Everything from the fact that there's cities, there's counties, there's special districts, there's school districts. We talk about education. Actually, that was probably the one place where I felt like it was the weakest link, because my argument is Taylor Swift went to a public school, um, and I use it as an example to talk about how schools are funded. And I will tell you that every single class there is somebody who goes, I didn't know that, that's so helpful to know, that was my favorite piece of the class. And so I consider that a win, when we get people that are going, oh, I didn't know that this is how local government financing worked, that taxes come in and pay for these things. So so yeah, I that's my motto, that with this class is that I have the opportunity to influence a lot of students who wouldn't otherwise think about public affairs, and find ways to help them be better citizens, to help them be more empowered. I don't know if that answered the question, but I think I picked up on what Cassie was saying. So,
Um, yeah, Stacy, as I understand your question right now for us is about the classroom and how the classroom and you can be more helpful in terms of educating people about local government. And I would say the one thing is that it involves, and I want to thank what Dr. Bentley said and what Casey said, the kinds of careers that you can do in local government are varieties, everything from CPAs to one of the issues now is water engineers. But I think for the classroom, it's letting them know what local government does. Sometimes I've been asked to teach or to speak to a kindergarten class, and imagine speaking to a kindergarten class about local government. And I talk about the fact in Sanford we have over 600 employees, and some of them drive the cars with the big lights on top that when the lights go off, your parents say, oh, something. But others do other things, and that we have employees that are responsible for the parks. I asked the students, how many of you brushed your teeth this morning? And how did you do that? To the fact, never mind flushing the toilet, but just turning on the water. Well, there's a group of city employees that are responsible for getting water out of the aquifer, treating it, and getting it so. So it's the basic services that local government does. And for the students to understand that they can go into local government either as communicators, as was mentioned by Casey, or as accountants, as wastewater engineers. Certainly you think of law enforcement and public safety, but there's a lot of other careers in local government that are very satisfying and can be very rewarding.
can I just add one little thing on this? So last about a year and a half ago, I went to my son's fourth grade classroom. He was 10 at the time, and ran a mock election, but then started to, ask, did my whole little, have you encountered government today? And I was like, well, you've got two government employees here in the classroom. And the students pointed at me, and then they like collectively gasped. and turned around and looked at their teacher. And a couple of them went, "How come you didn't tell us you work for government?" And and it's a funny little anecdote, but I think it's a symptom of a larger problem. We don't do a good enough job telling people what local government is, who is local government. I mean, the 10-year-olds should have known. They've been in public school for, a very long time, and they didn't know. They were surprised. It was a shocking moment for them. And you know what? Like if they're in public school, they should have a positive opinion about government. But if we're not even telling them that it's a government service, I believe there's a marketing problem.
I would add to what Dr. Bentley said is that while we can talk about local government, there are even different functions of local government. For instance, we'll have people come to City Hall to get a marriage license. Well, that's not something that City Hall does. That's done by the county. So I think educating the public and students especially, but we need to do maybe a better job of educating the public on what the various roles of government are and what they do.
Moving toward our next question, I think one joy of my academic year is teaching our local government practicum class because students are engaged in a project and that project often places them in direct interaction with the public. And being able to dialogue and engage constructively with the public at the local level is so critical to local government service. Can you shed some light on how you believe that public administration education can help students better prepare for those encounters with the public, particularly in a an era of a certain level of distrust and skepticism about the role of government? And I think we can take this question in whatever order the panel would like to chip in.
I'll go first. And I think you touched on it, is that it's important for students to have the practical experience. And that could be by them attending a city commission meeting or city council meeting and getting to see the process and to see the kinds of debate that take place. We recently had a city commission meeting where a developer wanted to put a 7-Eleven in a major thoroughfare, but that thoroughfare was abutted by a residential area, and the residents came out. We normally don't get a lot of people at commission meetings, but there were about 40 people because the residents were affected. So they came out to voice their opposition. And I heard everything about the fumes of gas stations, the noise of the gas tankers filling up and the backing up sound. But people cared, and so they came out. One of the things that's a challenge to local government is getting residents involved. If we have a topic we want to discuss, I was at the Brookings Institute and said, well, why don't you have a meeting? And the idea that for a public to come out to a 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock meeting after working, after feeding their children, after doing homework is not that appealing. So if we really want to get to know the public, we really need to go to where they are. But in terms of the classroom and getting the students aware, getting them out, getting them to a city commission meeting, getting them to public sessions, having them interact with the elected officials at the local level, maybe something that students could do to help them get a better sense of what it is that local governments do.
Dr. Bentley, do you want?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So I'm going to jump in on this. I teach a class called Public Service and American Democracy for our freshmen, and I taught it in person last fall. And similar to the Taylor Swift class where I'm like, I just want to make better citizens. That is a goal in that class, but I also want students to really appreciate the variety of careers that are available. So I actually dedicate a good amount of the class's time to guest speakers. It's a twice a week, 75-minute class, probably 28 sessions. 5 of them I reserve for guest speakers. And I try to get people from a variety of different disciplines. I had a lobbyist. Oh, that one always shocks people. Lobbyist. Aren't they evil people? No, they're not. Look, they're actually quite engaging and charming. Um, but also people who I often end up inviting people who work for different levels of local government. I had a city manager come to the class last fall. I had someone who works for our county come to the class. So I try to have, I had one of our emergency management alums who works for another local government come to the classroom. And one is to kind of make them aware of the different types of careers, but two, to also make these people seem less shrouded in mystery and more like actual people who can be approachable. And I know that at the graduate level, we do that a lot in our classrooms as well, in terms of incorporating guest speakers, incorporating practitioners who teach for us in the classroom. Um, and also, like Norton says, some of those live experiences where they're either working with people in our local communities, or just asking them to attend meetings. I had a freshman last semester who wanted to do an honors contract, doesn't know much about much because she's 18 and, first semester freshman. And she's like, I'm interested. And she was like all over the place. And we finally settled on she was interested in education and education funding. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you watch a few school board meetings? And so 10 hours later, she comes back. She's watched like 10 hours of school board meetings for one school board, fascinated by it. She actually, on her own, watches school board meetings from three different other districts. And really, I think for her, it was kind of eye-opening to see how different those conversations were from community to community, depending on their funding situation, depending on the issues that were going on there. And I think that exposure is really, really helpful. So again, for her, that was kind of an extra credit thing for her honors contract. But in general, I really try to encourage students as much as possible to actually attend those meetings, like Norton was saying, or if they can even just watch a Zoom, because so many of them are available by Zoom now, because people don't want to go at night. And but being able to watch the meeting after the effects, like if you go to YouTube and Google school board meetings, you're going to come up with hundreds of different school boards. So that's I absolutely agree.
There's a couple of threads that I want to add on to. And I think when I was, one of the courses that I was able to develop the curriculum for, I had gone and asked my students in their introductions, like, what do you want to be, right, when you finish your academic program? And I went through during that point, and then later on in the semester, I went and talked to peers in other cities and communities and asked the HR department, okay, when was the last time you opened up a position like this? How many applications did you receive? How many vacancies were you filling for? And so it was, and I told my students, and I said, we're going to have like a career night. And we actually talked about all of those jobs, where to find the jobs, where like these are what those titles look like, and the things that you said that you were interested in, and how you can do it in local government. But here's also the realistic part that I want you to be aware of, because this is what the job market looks like. And so, and I had this, and I was like, I'm not here to be like negative, because I support you all and I'm going to be here for you every step of the way. And that was nearly 10 years ago. And I still have students that email me with job information and requests. But I was saying, like, this is the job that you said. They were hiring for one position and they received 700 applications. And if you and your friend you're sitting next to were both going to apply for this position, what sets you apart from the next candidate? Because this isn't this isn't that you're not good. It's just that maybe in this process there was somebody who had a stronger background or brought something different to the table. So let's look at internships, and let's look at volunteerism, and let's look at all of these other avenues that support you and get, because sometimes you can be absolutely amazing and it's just still not the job that you're going to get. And I think that that goes into the next point that I think is really important. I see a lot of difficulty in challenging conversations and conflict. And so, and I think that right now we can all collectively agree that things are a little confrontational at all levels in just interactions, right? And so if you are not used to having conflict or addressing hard conversations, and then you're going to be on the receiving end where, like Vishal said in the comments, right? Like something bad happens, so someone's talking to you, right? The people that we hear from in local government are people who are caring loudly. And so if you're not used to being cared at loudly, how do you not crumple under that pressure? Because especially in positions where you're the customer service front-facing person, how do you address that with professionalism, not take it personally, give answers? All of those things are important. And I have specialists that I hire that have never been yelled at, thankfully, right? Like nobody should be, but And then somebody comes to the customer service window and they're getting screamed at. And I have to help navigate because they can be resilient, right? And so how do we help students navigate those pieces so that when they have it in their professional life, they don't absolutely think that they did something wrong because they probably didn't, right? And even if they did, that's still not how they get treated. And so but that's not stopping the world from being reactive right now. And so all of those pieces are super important. And it can start in the classroom by giving those opportunities and those realistic conversations.
Yeah, I would agree. As a lot of the soft skills are very, very needed. And that's what will make somebody successful over somebody else. So,
I mean, both like what all of you said is just like my notes, like y'all, like my notes page here. And I mean, Cassie, to your point, that's something like that I struggle with of like even some days for myself and then some days like imparting to, my students, getting cared at loudly is like, it's just gonna, um, this is great advice. Thank you all. So, Cassie and I virtually met on a webinar 1,000 years ago, approximately, give or take, feels like it. And she just like dropped in this nugget of, and it wasn't even, we were just talking beforehand, it wasn't even the point of the webinar she and I were doing, and just drops in this like cool class. And I was like, whoa, record scratch. And Cassie was kind enough to connect us for today to Dr. Bentley, who's talked just drop little nuggets again about this Taylor Swift class that got created to really just bring local government to life. So, Dr. Bentley, can you share a little bit more about this idea, how it came to be? Just give us the Taylor Swift love that we've all been waiting for.
Not sure everybody on this webinar is a Swiftie, but but
They're
if
gonna
not,
be. They're
they're
gonna
gonna
be.
be. Um, in fall 2023, one of another faculty member at ASU and a couple of other faculty throughout the nation started developing and designing Taylor Swift classes. And the faculty member who did that here, it was in psychology, it was an upper division elective. The class had 40 seats. Now, ASU is a university of 150,000 students. Right. But the fact that she was doing this got significant media attention. And as a faculty member, I looked at that and I was like, why would you put yourself through all of this media attention for a class that like filled, the before the semester even started? And in fact, at one point she stopped accepting media requests. But I remember at the time thinking, if I were going to do that, I would do that as an online class where, we could really offer something that's a cool class to all of our students. And my colleagues and I had actually had a different conversation about how could we really catch the attention of some of that younger demographic. And one of them, because Taylor Swift was on all of our minds because of this media attention, someone said, well, could we do a Taylor Swift class? And so I never envisioned coming out as a fan of Taylor Swift to all of my colleagues. That was not on my bucket list. That was not something that I was really interested in. But I did say, I was like, yeah, we can do that. And they were like, well, maybe we could have multiple faculty collaborate on this. I'm like, and they're like, yeah, it would probably take us a year or two because, we're dealing with faculty timeframes, right? And I'm like, or I could just do it for spring. And we got 480 students that first semester. Yeah. So first time running a 7.5 week online class with 480 students. I was so grateful for Cassie and the rest of my team. I was really trying to bring people in who had some experience because it was a lot. And, since then, the enrollment has not been quite as robust. We've had, usually between 90 and 140 students a semester. It's still pretty significant. Yeah, no, I know, Stacey. But and what's funny is that yes, there are definitely like the 18 and 19-year-olds, but there's also the moms of Taylor Swift fans. There's the aunts of Taylor Swift fans. There's the boyfriends of Taylor Swift fans that end up in this class because they want to learn more about someone who's important to someone they love. It's actually really, really heartening. And then there's the people looking for an easy elective. Guess what? I take them too. I want them to be better citizens as well. I don't care what brings them to my classroom. And so the class is actually heavy on content and light on assignments because I want them to be exposed to a variety of different things. And it turns out that, as one of my colleagues discovered when he asked me, what does Taylor Swift have to do with public policy? Well, my response was, well, yes, one, a lot. But now my response is, what do you have to do with public policy? Because if you have anything to do with public policy, then so does she. And so it's like I said before, it's really an intro to government. We talk about the difference between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And we then talk about civic engagement and the various ways that you can engage with your different governments, and that can include things like volunteering as well as running for political office and the various aspects to that. We talk about how she has engaged in policy advocacy. She's spoken out very publicly about the Violence Against Women Act. She's spoken out in support of the Equality Act, and which gives us the opportunity to talk about how just because you advocate for a policy doesn't mean that it actually becomes policy. And then we talk about federalism. And honestly, when I launched the class, she had just had a bunch of non-consensual deepfake pornographic images released on one of the social media platforms, and so it was a very violating experience. It was brought down within 18 hours because her fan base was so vocal in reaching out to the leaders of X. But most people, they don't have that kind of robust fan base, and actually getting those types of images removed is really difficult. And when the class launched, there were only like a couple of states that had policies about this. Well, when I did a significant update of the class last year, not only had the federal government passed something, but 48 states now have laws about this, one of them named the Taylor Swift policy. And so it's an opportunity to talk about how bad things can happen, but when government hasn't caught up with those bad things, they may not be crimes. They may be very terrible, but they're not crimes. We talk about the difference between civil and criminal law using some of her songs. She talks about murder. She talks about wills. So we get to go into some of that. She was actually subject to a civil lawsuit. She had there was a DJ who was later by a civil court jury found guilty of assault and battery. He had accused her of tortious interference, which I get to teach students what tortious interference is, which actually is very pertinent to their lives, because if they're ever in a car accident or have any disputes with an employer, that type of stuff can be really important. We talk about the economy. One of my favorite lessons is capitalism and the new market of friendship bracelets that emerged during the Eras Tour. We talk about supply and demand in the NFL. We talk about GDP. We talk about the antitrust law and Ticketmaster. We talk about intellectual property law. By the way, did you know that the Copyright Office is under the Library of Congress? It's under the legislative branch. It's wild that there's some of these weird things that, you think of separation of powers, you think it's all exact and precise, but it's not. It's living and breathing, and there's some really odd exceptions. So we talk about intellectual property, and then we conclude with local governments, and not just talking about the structures of local governments, but we talk about how communities prepare for mega events, and the importance of urban planning and emergency response services in these things. And unfortunately, there's some sad examples to talk about just in her own experience with the fan who died in Brazil, and then the cancellation of the tour dates in Austria. So it's a wide ranging class. I think Cassie can tell you, like, we cover a lot of ground, but I think the students agree with me by the end of the class that Taylor Swift actually has a lot to do with public policy, both in terms of what she tries to do, how it affects her lives, but also there's some really great examples that emerge of her fan base coalescing together and taking action because of things they've experienced together, whether it was Ticketmaster or other issues. So coming together and practicing civic engagement, which I think makes it more tangible to them for, like, oh, if they can do this and reach out to a government and they're a fan just like me, then I can do that too. So.
And I
Dr.
just
Bentley, that was
7.5 weeks.
helpful. Yeah, that was very helpful, Dr. Bentley. I was thinking she was a singer.
It turns out she's a person and a citizen of the United States. But yes, she is also a singer and songwriter.
So at several points in the webinar, we've acknowledged that local governments have a wide range of responsibilities, from education to policing to parks and recreation services. But we have many different types of local governments providing those services, from cities to counties to special districts. Again, the Midwestern Township is among my favorite. So what can we do to help make students more aware of the number and diversity of types of local government within our classrooms, so that they're thinking about city halls, which are very important, but they're also thinking about township offices and the local cemetery district and everything else. And Norton, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, Eric, that's a very good point. And I would add to that not only the kinds of governments, but then the types of governments. You have the council manager form of government, the commission form, the strong mayor form. So I think talking about the different kinds, like you say, the school districts, the water districts, the sewer districts, and but also then the types of local governments and the difference between a mayor in a strong mayor form of government versus the mayor in a weak form of government, or a council manager form of government. So I think including those would be helpful for students to know, because a lot of average people don't know. I can tell you in my city, I've been in 6 different cities as a city manager, and often people say, well, what does the mayor do? Well, it all depends. Now, right now in this city, the mayor is a school teacher. He teaches science. He's in City Hall a couple of times a month. There's a commission meeting. They'll have people that will call up and say, I want to talk to the mayor. I have a problem with my neighbor. Well, help us to understand that, because we can also help you with that. So helping the students to know the kinds of governments, as you pointed out, and then the types of governmental structures, whether it's a council manager, strong mayor, or commission form.
I think I need to just go back to meeting people where they're at. And I think that it's easier when you have an audience of self-selected students, right? They've already pursued a degree program in this, and that's really a lot of those times that is where you're catching your students. And so having an elective that, and I grew up in public servant households, right? Like, so my family, they were government people. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked for the state prison system, so he was a state employee. And so I already knew what that traditional government job looked like. And I always knew that my career path was going to be public service. I just didn't know which path it was going to take. But if you have somebody whose world is private sector or business or those traditional things, then they're only getting, especially at that, as they become an adult, right? They're getting whatever they have at home or whatever the media is telling them. And so thank goodness for Parks and Rec. I saw Leslie Nopes, right? Like, because that introduces some people to it, right? But even that era has now passed. So meeting students in different ways and creating an elective that when you're looking at your course catalog and you go, that Taylor Swift, cool, like I'll take that. And then we trick them into it's how you're going to learn about local government or like, and in seeing this, the passages from the students, they are walking away with, again, even if it's 5% more knowledge, right? But in that 7.5 weeks, you heard everything that she covers in that class, that they're learning a ton. And so you have to find creative ways to meet the other students that might not be falling into your public affairs classes, to create that spark in a different way.
I don't really have anything to add at this point. I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Yeah, if you definitely have questions, please drop them in the chat, or I think, Nicole, I think we can unmute if people want, right? So we can definitely do that. And, while folks are thinking, the last question that we had prepared, is there something that we didn't ask you, that Eric and I didn't ask you all, that you think like, oh, we just really need to impart today? And if the answer is like no, that's okay too. But please, and any order of the
Yeah,
panel, go
I
ahead.
would I would say to have the students really think about and explore having a career in public service, and particularly in my preference is local government, because at some point I'm going to retire and I'd like to be in a city that has people that are knowledgeable about local government running the city. So we're going to be needing replacements, and in the meantime, I like the idea of the younger people. We have a intern here, and he will be at meetings and he'll say things that we hadn't thought of. So I think in having them engage as they can, whether it's an internship or volunteering, because they bring something to the organization that others may not bring. So I would encourage them to become involved and to look at local government as a viable career.
I would echo that and the value of an internship as a person who has had several fellowships and internships and personally have gotten a lot out of that. It's made me a stronger employee now, but I those are invaluable. The other piece of it is there are more paths to local service, and I say this with absolute love, Norton, than being a city manager. And so I have had a lot of experiences where traditionally, I hear a lot of students that only see I have to become a budget analyst, I have to work as a management analyst in the city manager's office, and I'm going to be a city manager, and that's the only career path in local government. And there are so many other opportunities that can lead you to that job if that's what you ultimately want. But I've bless the people that have said this to me because I respect them so much, but they're like, well, everybody wants to be a city manager. And I'm like, I mean, maybe someday, but maybe not, right? And there are other paths. And so when I chose and went to a department, that was super outside the norm of my personal cohort. My cohort, everyone was only looking for that budget job or that management analyst in a city manager's office job. And anything else than that wasn't going to work for them. And I was the first one gainfully employed, but I was in a department where I got to do all of those same projects that I would have done as a budget analyst or a management analyst in the senior man, but I did it for the police department, which one might argue gives me a whole lot of experience that I can then impart as I continue growing in my career journey, right? And so we've talked about all those other paths and opportunities, social workers, communicators, scientists. There's so many disciplines that we need to make local government work. And you can get to that top seat job. That is incredibly important. You've got to have well-rounded people in those seats, but it's not the only path. And so emphasizing all that variety in the classroom so that people are energized because you want amazing people in every single one of those seats all along the way too. And so they're all equal and important to get the job done and to support our communities. And so however you support that career journey is in the classroom, I think that starts a lot of other pieces.
Cassie was just talking about the role of the police, and people can certainly identify police officers. They get their uniforms from procurement. They get all their equipment from purchasing. So the importance of having a good person behind the police department that's responsible for making sure that whether it's the bullets or the vehicles, the whole procurement process for the police officers to be able to do their job, that person is a very important person.
I just want to throw one concept out there because it's something that we at ASU really take seriously. It's work integrated learning. And so we have a lot of relationships with local communities around us that will bring projects to our capstone class for our students to work on, which gives them an opportunity to engage with people. And it's actually turned into a great networking opportunity for the students as well. We actually do some of this in our undergraduate classes as well. And we've found that it's like a very mutually beneficial relationship because people working in government get to see the next generation and figure out their quirks and how to communicate and connect with them. And then the students also get all of those rich learning experiences that Cassie and Norton have been talking about of, figuring out these different departments, seeing how all these different things work. And so I just want to say that's something that we've really worked hard to incorporate. And we've also had an increasing number of fellowships where students are placed working with local communities while also working on their master's degree. And that's been very beneficial as well.
We do have a few minutes. If anybody has anything there's a neat idea in the chat for kind of like Vishal says kind of like a hackathon where, an idea could be working with schools in case anybody is in a place where they can't see the chat. Working with schools where the student presents the current challenges and problems they're facing and invites students to share their ideas like a hackathon. It could be like one day where local leaders help them improve their ideas and the winners can work to implement it. So that sounds kind of fun. Yeah, and hopefully, Norton, like we were saying before, the prize could be better than, a line on a CV. maybe like an actual prize. That would be nice. Um, well, I guess seeing none, we can call it a day. I'll just end with some of my takeaways from today that I wrote down, and I'll end with be clear about the scope and type of, local governments, what they are and what they do. Really hammer home, Cassie was just saying about the vastness, that there's so many opportunities. Um, all of our panelists said in a different way, connecting to people, where they are, working on those soft and human skills in our classrooms, being creative. I think we heard really great examples of that today where we can. And I think all of our panelists, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said it much better, that local government's where it's at. So they gave examples of that. Dr. Ziemering, last word can go to you if you would like it.
Well, thank you, Stacy, and thank you to our guests for joining the conversation today. I think there are many great faculty and government professionals contributing to public affairs education with an emphasis on local government. And I believe our committees hope that more NASPA member schools will find a place for local government management in their curriculum. Please reach out to colleagues in the field who are already doing this work, because it's so important to introduce our students to the vital work of local government.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Nicole at NASPA, for giving us the space to do this. And as Dr. Ziemering said, we're always here. Thank you all so much. Thank you again. Have a good afternoon, everyone. That was so fun. Thank you,
That was fun.
guys.
I was gonna thank Norton.
You know, yeah, Norton's on our advisory board here. Let me stop this recording.